All right, we're going to start with the fourth step of how a bill becomes a law. This is going to follow the third step in the House, which would be the House Rules Committee, and then committee work in the Senate. So remember, the Senate doesn't have a Rules Committee, whereas the House does. So we're going to talk about floor action on the Senate first. And remember, things are a little more fast and loose in the Senate because there's fewer of them, and they're supposed to be the more experienced statespersons. So, and they don't have a rules committee, so debate looks fundamentally different in the Senate than in the House. For instance, there's unlimited time for debate in the Senate. Also, in the Senate, they can add any amendments to a piece of legislation. Riders would be any amendment that changes the law that doesn't have to necessarily do with spending. And earmarks are going to be pork barrel legislation or pork spending that's tacked on to a bill. These amendments don't have to have germaneness, so they don't have to be relevant to the original text of the bill. So you could have an agricultural bill and have amendments tacked on that deal with education, and that's fine. Another thing that they have in the Senate that they don't have the House that would prevent a bill from getting to the floor is something called the hold. A hold is when a senator requests that a bill doesn't reach the floor. Generally, they'll ask the majority leader or tell the majority leader that they don't want to see the bill get the floor because they don't want it to go up for a vote. Generally, this is because a bill is going to be filibustered anyway, and the senator might want some more time, like they're trying to buy some more time to get support. The Senate, you could also use unanimous consent agreements. This is agreement to limit the time of the debate to expedite the passage of a bill. So even though they do have unlimited time of to debate a bill, if there's something really pressing, like a budget bill, that if they can't get it passed and it's going to cause a government shutdown, what they'll do is they can work as, they can do a unanimous consent agreement and try to get the passage of the bill quickly without going through the prolonged debate. Now, the opposite of a unanimous consent agreement would be a filibuster. Okay, this is only allowed in the Senate, and this is the rule of the Senate. And the two chambers, the House and the Senate, they can make their own rules, and they can change the rules if they want to. So none of this stuff, like these procedures, like the filibuster isn't in the Constitution, so it doesn't necessarily have to exist. But a filibuster is a strategy of the minority party to delay a vote on a bill. And what it is technically it's a prolonged speech to prevent a bill from going to vote. So you would just have a senator stand in front of the Senate and talk and talk and talk, and then that would prevent the bill from going to an up or down vote. But nobody filibusters anymore. All you have to do is threaten to filibuster. So right now the Democrats are the minority party, and if the Republicans want to pass a bill like repealing Obamacare, for example, the Democrats can threaten to filibuster that, and then the Republicans would know that it can't go to a vote because the threat to filibuster exists. Now, when we get to how the budget process works, we'll talk about how reconciliation agreements and stuff can bypass the need for a filibuster-proof majority, but don't worry about that right now. Just know that filibuster is a strategy of the minority party to delay the vote on a bill. You can stop a filibuster, but you need 60 senators to vote to stop a filibuster. And right now, the Republicans don't have, and this is 2017, the Republicans do not have a majority of 60 Republicans in the Senate in order to stop a filibuster, so they can't use a cloture motion. So basically, they have to have a filibuster-proof majority if they want to get anything accomplished. Because of party unity votes and party whips, Democrats aren't really going to cross over to the other side most of the time to support a Republican piece of legislation. So what's been floated around is the nuclear option. The nuclear option would basically blow up the filibuster. Again, each chamber gets to determine their own rules. So the nuclear option is a vote to get rid of the filibuster. And it's already occurred because you can't filibuster confirmation of appointments anymore. So, they've already filibustered that. or they've already nuclear optioned that filibuster. So if there was this, like, Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, she wouldn't have gotten 60 votes to get a cloture and get approved. So, like, Mike Pence had to come in and do the vote. But again, like I said, there's no filibuster anymore on appointments. Okay. Here is a chart. The filibuster use over the last 50 years, it has increased. Of course, the colors are going to correspond with the political parties that have used it. So you can see that the darker bar is filibustered, and then you can see where there's actually been a cloture motion, and it's hard to get cloture motion. Nobody's had a filibuster approved majority in Congress since 2008. Okay, in the House, even if the Rules Committee allows for debate, debate's still limited. If the House wants to pass something quickly and expedite the passage of a bill in the House, they can work as a committee as a whole. So that basically would mean they would skip the committee step and go straight to the floor to decide like up or down vote. And again, legislation for the most part gets passed with a simple majority vote. Things like treaties and confirmation of appointments in the Senate, that's going to require a supermajority. But most legislation gets passed with a simple majority vote. So after they've debated it and stuck on amendments, again, in the House, if there is amendments, it has to be germane. Okay, once we've left that floor action, then it goes to the fifth step, and that's roll call vote. This is when the bill gets voted on. So in the House of Representatives, it looks pretty much like this little guy right here. Your House of Representatives member has an ID card. They scan the card, and then they press yay, nay, or present to vote. In the Senate, they actually walk up to the floor and they do a thumbs up or thumbs down. So in 2007, when the repeal to Obamacare was presented and John McCain went up there and made his dramatic thumbs down vote, it got a lot of hype. He did kind of drama it up. So it's important at this point to, again, review what influences how a congressperson votes. It's going to depend on whether you're acting as a delegate, a trustee, or a politico. The number one thing that's going to influence your vote is your political party. So your party whips, your leadership, maintaining that party unity score. You're, of course, going to think about your constituency. And as a politico, like, you're going to think about interest groups and the influence that interest groups have over you. Now, if the Senate has passed it, then it's going to go to the House. If the House passes it, then it's going to go to the Senate. And then the other House is going to adjust it. Or they're going to make their own changes. So they're going to have their own version of a bill. And generally, they don't look exactly the same. And this is kind of where the Senate can rob the power of the purse, because the Senate's going to be able to add their earmarks and adjust, like, the spending that way. So even though all revenue bills and all spending bills originate in the House, the Senate has the opportunity to rob the power of the purse with a House bill. So you're going to have two different versions of a bill. And you can't give those two different versions to the president. So the sixth step is something called a conference committee. And I've talked about conference committees before. A conference committee is made up of members of the House and the Senate who worked on the original legislation. So the whole point of a conference committee is to resolve the differences between the two versions of the bill, the version that went through the House and the version that went through the Senate. So the tax reform bill that was just proposed, the House has one version, the Senate's changed it up a little bit. You can't present those two separate versions of the bill to the president. So what you do is you have a joint committee, which is made of members from the committees that originally worked on the legislation, and they're going to compromise. They can't add any new stuff, but they're going to come up with one cohesive version that both House and Senate members can approve of. And then it's going to head back to each chamber for a revote. All right, so it goes, at this point, we've gone through introduction, committee, House Rules Committee, floor action, vote, conference, and then once you've gone through conference and the two chambers have passed, then it's going to go to presidential action. Okay. Now, in the Constitution, there's something called the Presentment Clause. The Presentment Clause requires that all bills must be presented to the President for consideration. So, presented to the President, Presentment Clause. Now, the President needs to see legislation passed. One of his informal roles is chief legislator, and he has to lobby for legislation that's going to match his policy or his political promises that he made during the campaign. So in 2017, you see Donald Trump using Twitter and the bully pulpit to get Republicans in Congress to pass legislation that he promised to do while he was on the campaign trail, like repealing Obamacare or reforming the tax code. So all presidents are going to use the threat of a veto. Again, this is part of them using that bully pulpit. And if they have, so the threat of the veto is basically used because the president really wants to work legislation out with Congress. He needs them to further his agenda. So he's going to threaten them if they're working on a piece of legislation and he doesn't like the way it looks. He's going to say, all right, I'm going to threaten to veto this if you give it to me the way it looks right now. Go back to the drawing board, work on it a little bit more. Give me something that I can actually sign. All right, so that's why they threaten to use the veto. Now, when it doesn't work, threat of veto isn't going to work if there is enough members of Congress to override a veto anyway. Because if there's 2/3 majority support for the bill, they don't care if the president's threatened to veto it. They're like, well, we'll just override it if you veto it anyway. Or if it's divided government. Because the opposition party doesn't care if the president is able to get his agenda passed, and they don't care if he threatens to veto everything or actually vetoes everything. Because then, on the campaign trail, those Congress members can go and say, the president has stopped our agenda at every moment, and the president isn't getting anything accomplished. Okay, so what is a veto? A veto is a rejection of legislation. There are two types of vetoes. There is the outright veto where he rejects it, and then there's a pocket veto. A pocket veto is a little bit more nuanced. All right, so pocket veto happens if he does nothing in 10 days, then the bill, if he does nothing in 10 days and Congress is in recess, then the bill is dead. Now, what makes a pocket veto different than a regular veto is that Congress is in recess, which means that the bill doesn't go back to Congress for a potential override. So when the president pocket vetoes a bill, it's dead. There is no reviving it. So if you're Congress, don't present anything to the president within 10 days of going into recess. All right, the last thing, line item veto. This doesn't exist anymore, but it still pops up in the AP exams. So the president would take out parts of legislation. So if you had a bill that was full of pork or earmarks, the president could go through and mark out the earmarks and let the bill pass without the earmarks. And it's kind of what Clinton used a lot to balance the budget back in the 90s. So he would take out spending, and in a particular case of New York, he took out spending for hospitals in New York, so earmarks that would go to New York's hospitals. New York sued him, saying that that's overuse of his power under presentment clause. He either signs the bill or he rejects the whole bill. There is no in between. You can't just take out parts of the bill and reject it, because essentially he's writing legislation. And the Supreme Court agreed. So in Clinton versus New York, the line item veto was rejected. All right, so that's the 4 through 7 steps of how a bill becomes a law.